So today I'm going to be talking about um, the discipline called memory studies. This discipline is very interesting, very volatile discipline, and it's very recent. It's picking up pace, it's beginning to trend. Now, before we actually go into the basics and the specifics of this discipline, there are so many questions we need to ask ourselves. And the most basic of the questions would obviously be this: what are memories? Now, the term memory is rather abstract in nature. That is something we all know. As individuals, the way we look at the term memory, the way we perceive it, the way we understand it, the way we generate meanings about the term memory, it's very different. It's very different, and it varies massively from one person to the other person. What memory means to me, or what constitutes a memory to me, will not be the the same with you. What memory means to you is going to be very different from what it means to me. So when you have such an abstract term, when you have a term that is so democratic in nature, that it is so accommodating of multiple perspectives, what really are we going to do? We cannot really understand the discipline of memory studies without at least making an attempt to understand what the term memory means. So even if we make an attempt, a sincere attempt at trying to define the term memories, we find that since the term itself is very democratic in nature, it is going to involve a democratic approach. So we have to try to define the term from the perspective of multiple frameworks. It's going to involve a cross-disciplinary attempt, because all disciplines involve memories at some or the other level. Historians look at memories in a different way, psychologists look at memories in a different way, philosophers look at memories in a different way, and the students of literature and writers look at memory in a very different way. So when we try to define the term memory, we need to be cognizant of the fact that there are different disciplines that are trying to define the term as well, and their definitions are bound to be different from what we come up with. But that does not mean that any of the definitions are wrong. It just means that the definitions are different and they're all right. Now, obviously, when we begin to look at the term memory from multiple perspectives, we find that the meaning behind the term also changes. For instance, as I mentioned, a psychologist is going to look at memories from the point of view of the emotional principle. They're going to look at memories and how they make use of emotions, or how they affect emotions, and vice versa. Whereas a philosopher would be more interested in understanding whether memories have a moral implication, whether there is a logical process behind the formation of memories. Mostly philosophers, they try to answer one question with another question. When they try to define memories, they will probably ask a question like, why memories? What are memories? So it's the same concept, but the way people look at it and the meanings they generate from it is so vastly different. That's what makes the whole concept of a memory very enduring. Now, what happens when we choose to look at memories from a very academic perspective? From an academic perspective, how do we make sense of memories? How do we turn something as universal, as personal, as abstract as memories, and turn it into a corpus of knowledge? it is to answer that question that we move on to the next question, which is, what is memory studies? Now, if you have to define memory studies, we can say that memory studies is a multidisciplinary field which combines intellectual strands from anthropology, education, literature, history, philosophy, psychology, sociology, among others. As as we saw in the previous slide, the term memory is very democratic, and it involves a democratic approach. So similarly, the discipline of memory studies is truly democratic as well. So what we find is that memory studies is an amalgamation of the work that different disciplines do with memory. Anthropologists work on memory from their point of view with their resources. People in education look at memory from their point of view with their resources. And sociologists interpret memory in their own way, and these multiple interpretations are put together in this one discipline called memory studies, so that we are in a position to showcase the truly diverse nature of this term. And that is how we actually convert something as personal and universal as memories uh, into a corpus of knowledge. Now, as is the case with every discipline, when exactly did memory studies as a academic endeavor uh, originate? Many memory scholars have tried to answer this question, and we found that we cannot really point out at a very specific time period, but it is widely believed that memory studies as a discipline emerged in the late 20th century. And um, it's not a very definite time frame, but uh, it is pretty certain that it did emerge in the late 20th century. And also, we find that the origin of memory studies is closely linked with that of another academic discipline, which is that of Holocaust studies. Um, Obviously, we all know what the Holocaust is. Um, what happened during the Holocaust, what happened under Hitler's regime, what happened under Hitler's Germany. So Holocaust studies is a scholarly discipline that is concerned with the academic study of Holocaust and its implications. So since the base for Holocaust was trauma and human experience, it is so when the Holocaust studies tried to understand um, the implications of the Holocaust, we find that memory studies, as I was saying, does have its basis in the Holocaust. Now, memory studies as a discipline has its core in three neurological processes. And these processes are remembering, forgetting, and recollecting. Now, these three processes are at the core of any memory creation. You cannot create a memory unless one of the three or all three processes are involved. And this point will become clear as we move further. But this is a very crucial point that everyone needs to remember as far as memory studies is concerned, because without these three processes, we wouldn't basically have the discipline itself. As is the case with every discipline, uh, every discipline has its own set of people who were the pioneers, who were instrumental in bringing the field to fruition. And in memory studies as well, we have a bunch of people who were very important, whose efforts are what brought this field into existence. And one very important person in this regard is Maurice Holbrook. Maurice Holbrook was a French philosopher and sociologist who is often considered as being the founding father of memory studies. Now, why is he considered to be the founding father of memory studies? So, Holbrook wrote a book called or titled La Mémoire Collective, which was written in the year 1950. And in this book, Holbrook proposed the concept of collective memory, which in modern day jargon is also known as group memory. So in his book, La Mémoire Collective, Holbrook emphasized on one particular point, and he said that memories that are shared by a group of people or a community are significant, and that an individual's memories, an individual's personal memories, when placed against the backdrop of a group's memories, they get enhanced. So he emphasized on the importance of a collective memory, the importance of sharing memories between people. He believed that it's through the act of creating shared memories or bonding over shared memories that a truly communal identity can develop. So it was with all these theories that Holbrook proposed the term collective memory, and it is from there that the discipline of memory studies gradually took off. But it's been quite some time since Holbrook made the initial contribution to the field. Since then, many others have taken up the baton and they're doing excellent work. And here, there are three such people. The first person is Astrid Earle. Astrid Earle, Dr. Astrid Earle is the professor of Anglophone literatures and cultures at Goethe University in Frankfurt. Then we have Jan Assmann, who is a German Egyptologist, and his wife Aleida Assmann, who is the professor of English and General Literature at University of Constance, Germany. So these three academics are very famous memory scholars, and they are the leading names in the field, and they have made a lot of contributions to the literature in memory studies. And these three memory scholars, whose work I closely follow, and they've been doing fantastic work, and their names that we need to know if we plan on pursuing memory studies in depth later on. Moving on, we need to discuss types of memories. So memory studies looks at different types of memories, and it studies each of them for what they are, and it emphasizes on their characteristics to a great extent. What are these memories? Why are they different? And what do these memories signify? So to begin with, we have a collective memory. Now, collective memory is a concept that was already discussed just a few minutes ago under Maurice Holbrook. Now, collective memories are, as mentioned previously, the shared memories of a community or a group of people. And these memories become very important because it is often through a shared reminiscing of these memories that the histories of major events are reconstructed. And we also find that collective memories also provide the basis for the formation and sustenance of communal identities. Now, what exactly or how exactly does a collective memory perform this function? It's very simple. There have been many great tragedies in the past, and um, what the what we know, what we the people who haven't witnessed a tragedy know about that tragedy is through the recollections of the people who have witnessed it. And when they recollect memories in a group, it is their shared memories that becomes the basis for that group. It becomes the identity for that group. So we find that not only are those memories helping us reconstruct and understand a tragedy, understand the history of what happened in the past, they also at the same time providing the people who are recollecting the memories with a fertile base uh, on which they can construct their own group. They can construct a fresh identity on the basis of those memories. And very often we find that an individual's personal memory gains additional significance when juxtaposed against the backdrop of a collective memory. Yes, that happens because um, when a person performs the act of recollection individually, um, it's personal. It's something very personal. It becomes an anecdote. But when a person does the same thing in the company of a group of people where everyone has had a similar experience but they have a different recollection of it, it becomes history. And we know that histories are more prominent and more far reaching than anecdotes. So an individual's personal memory not only gets enhanced, but it also gets shaped according to its position or its amalgamation in a group. So we have some examples to understand the term collective memory. For instance, we have soldiers who fight in many wars. This has been going on since forever. So we have the memories of soldiers. Now, when soldiers have fought in a war, they fight in a regiment, they fight in a group. We find that well after the war is over, it is the memories of the war that binds the soldiers together. They often develop very strong bonds that keeps them together even for years after the war is done. And even when they grow really old, the memories they have of the battlefield, the memories they have of their comrades, of the fellow soldiers, it gives them an identity that no other role in life can actually provide them with. Similarly, we also have the memories of the survivors of a major tragedy. For instance, much of what the world knows about the 9/11 attacks is through uh, narratives that have come from the US, and most of the narratives were uh, woven around the memories of the survivors. Uh, and we find that the the shared memories of the survivors of the 9/11 attacks is not only the source of a very major and a very important historical event, but it's also given them a common substratum. It's also given them a different way of looking at themselves. Through their common experience of surviving 9/11, the memories of that experience has brought people together in a way very few other events can. So it has given them an identity, and that's a fact that cannot be denied. It is this very precise process that we find at work behind war memorials. So every country has its own war memorial to commemorate the fallen, to commemorate those who died for the cause. And the war memorials basically try to pay homage to the dead by uh, by trying to uh, ignite or by trying to stir the national collective memory of the people. For instance, most of the World War One and World War Two memorials across the West, um, they were built by groups of people who wanted to have a physical manifestation of their shared memories. So we have very famous war memorials that are basically physical manifestations of the national collective memory of a nation's effort to remember, to preserve the memories of those who are unfortunately not with us anymore. So this is how the collective memory works, and collective memory is one of the first types of memories that was studied under the field of memory studies. So obviously it's a very important topic. So moving on, we have a social memory. Now, social memory is very similar to collective memory. In certain cases, the terms are even interchangeable, but we cannot deny the fact that there still remains a very thin hairline difference between the two terms. So we find that social memory usually explains the relation between memory and identity, like how memory and identity came together, and how people came together and how they identified themselves as a part of a group. Now, to understand this, we can take the example of rituals, festivals, and traditions. So we have different social and ethnic groups across different countries. For instance, let's take our own country, let's take India. We have different groups, we have different ethnic groups, we have different religious groups, we have different linguistic groups. Now, each of these groups have rituals, they have festivals and traditions that are very unique to them. And they are actually, if you actually look at it, if you break it down, we find that rituals are actually a form of memory. So the rituals are passed on from generations to generations, and they're preserved as memories. They're preserved as social memories, and they continue to be preserved as social memories because it is through the performance of a ritual, it is through the celebration of a festival, it is through the maintenance of the tradition that the social identity of the group remains intact. For example, for the people of Tamil Nadu, the festival of Pongal is a huge thing. It's a huge festival, and each group celebrates the festival in its own way. And the festival is very closely associated with the identity of being a Tamilian. It is very closely associated with the language itself. So this is an example of how the social memory shapes the identity of a group and how uh, it ensures that that even though the members of a group change, the social memory will remain intact and it will just keep getting passed on from generation to generation. Moving on, we have personal memories, which are fairly easy to understand. So personal memory refers to the memory of a place, event, person, or thing that is very exclusive to an individual and is closely shaped by the individual's personality and choices. Yes, we all have memories of our own. We have memories that will strictly be ours, which we don't really share with other people, and those memories are shaped by the very essence of who we are and how we think, what kind of a person we are. So very good examples of those are biographies and diaries. So biographies, we know, is uh, an account of a person's life, and any account of a person's life obviously involves a significant amount of recollection by the person. And that is obviously a very individual act which becomes very meaningful in the long run. And diaries, again, a very obvious source of a personal memory where an individual transfers his memories of a day or a week or a month onto a page in the way they understand it. So diaries record personal memories very effectively, and so do photographs. Photographs of the person clicked by others, photographs that they take of themselves, for example, uh, through selfies. So personal memories uh, have so many manifestations, and that makes them very important because they are integral, they are at the very center of shaping the narrative of who we are. And uh, the idea of who we are that we try to project outwards is very closely shaped by our personal memories. Then we have episodic memory. Now, episodic memories are the recollections of everyday events and happenings. Now, in the first uh, reading of this definition, we will find that episodic memories are very much like personal memories. But there's one key difference, and the difference is that unlike personal memories, episodic memories are closely defined by the time and space frameworks. So, episodic memory is a very specific act of remembering. Like you remember, like we tend to remember a few days with greater clarity than we tend to remember others. For instance, we remember a milestone birthday, like an 18th birthday, uh, with greater clarity than we remember our other birthdays. Uh, we might remember a class reunion after several years of leaving school with greater clarity than we might remember other days. We might remember the wedding of a very close friend with greater clarity than we might remember other events. So episodic memories are memories that are constructed around a very specific, very important episode that has great impact on an individual's life, and that can also be said of a group. That can also be said of a group. Even groups can have episodic memories, and it is usually through a gradual build-up of episodic memories that we get collective memories. So these were a few types of memories that were important for us to understand before we move on to the next section. As mentioned in the opening slide of what is memory studies, the crux of the discipline memory studies is constituted um, on or it's constituted around three processes. So one of those processes is the process of remembering. Now, when we talk about the process of remembering and the term of remembering in the context of everyday jargon, it has a very different significance. We use the word remember and the verb remembering in our everyday context with such ease. So, for instance, we say, you know, we ask or we get asked, do you remember the answer to this question? Do you remember at what time we were supposed to visit the doctor? Do you remember uh, if, do you remember if tomorrow is the day? Or we find the word remember also being used in many instructions. So we see posters, we see instruction pamphlets, we see we see this word remember everywhere. For instance, as it's also on the slide, please remember the word limit for this essay is 500 words. So in these cases, the act of remembering and the need to remember is very utilitarian. We remember, we try to remember because an action is dependent on that remembrance. Let me phrase this in an easier way. So Let's take a very specific example. Let's take the example of, do you remember the answer to this question? Now, the reason the person who is asking this question wants us to remember is because that act of remembering will lead to a subsequent action, which is telling of the answer. For instance, if someone asks me, do you remember uh, in which year India got independence? And I say, yes, it was in 1947. My action of remembering and telling, an action of remembering and recalling that India got independence in the year 1947 um, becomes significant only in the subsequent action, which is which is me telling the answer when I say that, yes, uh, India got independence in 1947. So these are very action-based uh, remembrances. Um, the same can be used to explain the phrase, please remember the word limit for this essay is 500 words. Now, the reason they emphasize on this in the instruction pamphlet is uh, our remembering of this fact, our recalling of this fact while writing, translates into the subsequent action of us adhering or not adhering to the rule. Uh, so these remembrances lead to actions. Most remembrances and processes of remembering become important only in the action that follows the act of remembering. Now, when it comes to memory studies, this act of remembering uh, gains a lot of philosophical, political, and moral undertones. Uh, the act of remembering also becomes intertwined with responsibilities and with duties. Uh, for instance, when we remember the heroes of the past, for example, when we celebrate Martyrs' Day, or when we remember the contributions of India's freedom fighters, or when we remember our national leaders on their birth anniversaries and on their death anniversaries, the act of remembering um, becomes uh, becomes uh, like a vortex. A vortex. It's not a singular act. It is an act that has layers of meaning behind it. For instance, why are we remembering the freedom fighters? Because from history, we know that these freedom fighters have uh, have dedicated, have fought for the independence that we have today, and that elicits a sense of gratitude. And why do we associate leaders with certain dates? Because those dates had a significance in their life. Maybe it was the date they were born, maybe it was the day when they died, maybe it was the date when a very significant event happened in their life, which shaped what they did after that. So most of the time, when we remember national leaders or when we remember heroes of the past, we are remembering them out of a sense of respect. And that respect stems from the sense of duty that, that comes with nationalism, that comes with being a citizen of a country. And and we see this so when you compare remembering uh, national heroes with remembering instructions or remembering uh, answers to questions or remembering phone numbers, we find that they, although the same process is at work, the same neurological process is at work, it is the conditioning around the event of that we are remembering or the occasion that we're remembering that brings about the difference. For instance, if I'm asked to recall somebody's phone number, it doesn't. It's not an. It's not. It's not an act of major significance. And if I'm going to put an effort to recall the phone number, I do it out of a sense of helpfulness. But the act of that recall loses its significance once I've told the phone number to the person who needs it. But when uh, when I remember, or when I remember when I remember the contributions of our national leaders, or when I remember the contributions of the heroes of the past, or when I remember the contributions of our soldiers on a specific occasion, be it on Independence Day, on Republic Day, or um, or when we recall and remember the life of a person who has just passed away, um, that type of remembering, it becomes important because more often than not we don't do that remembering as an individual. We are often remembering those things in the context of a larger group. So that is uh, that is what exactly is meant by the process of remembering is laced with philosophical, political, and moral undertones. Now, according to a very famous memory scholar, Siegfried J. Schmidt, remembering means occasions. So, what he proposed is that we cannot remember uh, a person, event, or an action unless there is an occasion that needs it. Uh, this statement is very simple and can be understood with the help of very simple examples. For instance, um, I will not remember uh, a person's phone number until I have the need to call that person, or if someone else is in the need of that person's phone number. For instance, for another instance, I will not remember uh, a person's birthday until a week or a few days before that person's birthday comes around, because that's when because it is the act of remembering that the person's birthday is about to come that enables me to complete further actions, which might be making sure to wish the person, maybe spending the day with the person, maybe buying gift for the person. So you see that we don't remember things until there is an occasion that demands it. We don't, and this is very clearly seen in the examination environment. We don't remember certain points until a question demands that those points be written. We have a very general memory that is comprised of so many things. There are so many memories we've created throughout our lives, and and the memories that get remembered are the memories that are getting remembered because an occasion needs it. So this is a very complicated understanding of the term remembering, but it is this multifaceted trait of this process remembering that has made memory studies this versatile and this prominent. So moving on to the process of forgetting. Now, forgetting uh, is equally a neurological process of great significance. Now, we often think that the people and events uh, that we remember are important, are the ones that are important. We remember them because they are important. But in memory studies, what we forget is just as important as what we remember. Uh, and forgetting as a process happens at so many levels. Now, as remembering requires occasions, even forgetting requires occasions. So we have accidental forgetting. We forget so many things on a daily basis that can happen due to absent-mindedness. We might forget our we might forget the keys to our house uh, while going to college or while going for work in the morning, because we were in a hurry or we were just too absent-minded to uh, take the keys. Or we might forget to buy certain items on the grocery list because it just slipped our mind. So this is accidental forgetting. This is not forgetting that we do deliberately. There are so many things we forget uh, without meaning to forget them. We forget people's birthdays. Uh, Obviously, we don't deliberately forget people's birthdays. It just slips your mind. Um, and then you have deliberate forgetting, which is obviously a, a more significant process, and also one that is deeply important in memory studies. So when you have deliberate forgetting, it's it shows that there has been a significant effort put to ensure that a particular person or an event is forgotten. We find that it's human tendency to want to forget painful events that have happened. We would like to uh, forget the bad times. We would like to forget the unpleasant events that we have experienced, they and these unpleasant events can be of different can be of different types. For instance, we might have had a very embarrassing moment in public, and we would want to forget that because the memory of that embarrassment is preventing us from attending further public events. We might want to forget uh, a particular person who has caused great harm to us or who has brought great hurt to us. We might want to forget a particular period of our life which was not very constructive, or which was associated with habits and behaviors that are not very graceful. So we have a lot of events and experiences that we would like to forget entirely. More often than not, that does not happen because uh, the harder we try to forget, the stronger it stays in the memory. That's quite an oxymoron, but that's how it works. And then you have political forgetting. Now, political forgetting is also deliberate, but it has serious implications. For instance, we find political groups, be it a particular politician or a group of individuals, completely forgetting certain people certain events for their own benefit. We see this happening during we see this happening during elections. We see this happening otherwise also. We find them forgetting certain incidents, forgetting the needs and forgetting the needs and desires of a particular group of people, forgetting certain values, forgetting promises. That is the most important. They forget promises, and most of the forgetting that happens in the political scene is forgetting of it's convenient forgetting or forgetting of convenience. Uh, they do it because forgetting that particular promise or that particular event or that particular group just makes their functioning easier. So we have political forgetting, and then we have social forgetting. Social forgetting is when a group a group collectively tries to forget a very traumatic past. And the best example for this can be seen in the very recent Black Lives Matter movements and in the Black consciousness that was prevalent in the 1960s and 70s. The the African Americans, the members of the Black community, they united and they wanted to forget their past, which was dominated by slavery. They wanted to forget the years of subjugation where they were made to feel inferior to the whites. And in the present day, uh, they are trying to forget that so that they can develop a consciousness which would be free of the baggage of the past, and where they can reclaim their history they can reclaim their tradition, and they can put their amazing talents to great uses. And so that through all this, through an amalgamation of all this, they will be able to forge a completely different identity. So these are a few types of forgetting that I have uh, read about and found interesting. There are obviously many different types of forgetting that we can always look up. Now, one thing that was very interesting and that caught my eye is over the years, the survivors of Auschwitz, the concentration camps, and the Holocaust as a whole, they have pioneered the slogan, never forget. Uh, Obviously, these two words, the kind of impact they generate cannot be measured because we as a human society, irrespective of our national race and our gender identities, it is uh, our duty as human society to make sure that we never forget or never forget what happened during the Holocaust, because that was that event demonstrated the collective failure of humanity on the whole. So to not forget is different from to is a very different obligation than uh, to remember. They're not the same. To not forget something and to remember something, they are two very different processes. When we when we say we should never forget this, it becomes a matter of utmost importance. We should never forget the mistakes that other people have made. We should never forget um, the good things that people have done to you. You should never forget the kindness of people, and you should never forget the atrocities of people, because we learn from them. Whereas when we remember more out of a sense of duty than from a sense of obligation. So this this is important, especially when we place these two words in the context of the Holocaust. We find that forgetting also has huge historical implications, which is what memory studies on the whole tries to explore. Um, now, if we have to prevent forgetting, if we have to prevent social and communal forgetting, it often involves a certain translation of memories. Now, obviously, the memories of the survivors of an event, of a tragedy, are bound to die with them, but we do not want that to happen. So, if we want to prevent that from happening, we need to make sure that a translation of memories happen. Now, the more uh, the more we look into it, we find that there's one very specific mode of translation that happens, which is the translation of transgenerational memories being converted into prosthetic memories. So, transgenerational memories are the memories of those who have witnessed an event or a person firsthand. Um, for instance, let's take the COVID pandemic. Those of us who have lived through 2020 are the people who have witnessed the pandemic firsthand. The memories that we have of the pandemic are firsthand. When we try to describe the pandemic, what it was like, what were its impacts, how the way it shattered the world, when we try to uh, form a narrative around the pandemic, and we try to uh, uh, pass on that narrative to people who to people belonging to, let's say, the next generation, the people who will be listening to us 30, 40 years from now. When we pass on our memories of the pandemic, our memories as people who witnessed it firsthand, to people who will be listening to us or who will be reading about this pandemic 30, 40 years from now, the memories that they receive from us will become a prosthetic memory because they're receiving a second hand version of the memories. The memories that we have are first hand, they're original, they're receiving only fragments of it, copies of it. So it is through this passing on of narratives, through this passing on of memories across generations, that we can ensure that we do not forget very important events. It is through this translation of memories that we still remember the Holocaust, and we still actively work towards preventing another event of that kind. So we have dealt with the processes of remembering and forgetting, and moving on. I'm going to talk about another very important topic in the field of memory studies, and that is called agents of memories. Now, we find that memories can be transmitted easily, and how does the memory transmission happen? More often than not, we find that memory transmission happens through something. It can happen through a person, through a place, or a thing. And it is the concept of agents of memory. So that describes this. So in memory studies, the agents of memory is a concept that is quite interesting and unique. The term refers to a person, place, or thing that transmits memories between people, generations, or even nations. Now, what are a few examples of agents of memory? We have photographs and diaries, we have souvenirs, we have storytellers who are known by different names in different communities. They go by rabbis, mullahs, griots, and shamans. We have the media, we have tombstones, and we have monuments. Let's look at the first example. Let's look at photographs and diaries. Now, photographs and diaries are very obvious agents of memories. We have our own photographs, which provide us with memories of a specific period in our life. Our albums of childhood, our albums from when they were young, provide us memories of what we were like when we were too young to even understand what we were experiencing. And then with diaries, we have more accurate memories because diaries usually contain day-to-day accounts of our lives. So if we read the diaries of the year that has of the years that have passed by, we are able to recollect the memories of what the year was like, what kind of a person you were, and what kind of people did we meet, how have we changed compared to the previous years. So we can see how photographs and diaries work as agents of memories. They preserve memories and they pass them on to us as and when we visit them or see them. Then we have souvenirs. Now, souvenirs are more popular and more easily understandable in this context. Now, we often have objects that we would like to remember a place or a bunch of people by. We have souvenirs, like when we visit a particular holiday place, we try to bring back at least a keychain or a fridge magnet, so that whenever we look at it, for a brief moment, we are reminded of the time we spent there. And we also like remembering people through a set of souvenirs. We try to keep something that belong to a person so that we can remember them. For instance, we always preserve precious jewelry of our parents. We preserve things that were dear to our grandparents, so that even after they're gone, through that object, we feel like that person is still with us. So that's how souvenirs work. And then we have storytellers. Now, storytellers are majorly important because they sometimes pass on memories across generations. It is through their tales that we are able to uh, connect this, we're able to connect or form this loop of transmission where stories get passed on. And the modern day version of this storytelling would be gossip. We have a lot of gossip mongers who pick up news very quickly and they pass it on with such speed. And but we find that this gossip is also very central to the social fabric of a community. It can be any community. It can be an apartment building, it can be a locality, or it can even be a nation. So storytellers also pass on memories through tales, and media plays a similar role. It's the only difference is media tends to construct a more elaborate narrative around the storytelling, whereas storytellers try to stick to the authentic storytelling. And then we have tombstones. Now, tombstones are very interesting as agents of memories because a tombstone is a person's attempt of building a narrative of what the other, building the narrative, building a narrative of the deceased. For instance, we often find an epitaph on the tombstones, and that epitaph is mostly chosen for the deceased by his or her loved ones, by their loved ones. So when we visit the tombstone and when we read the epitaph, uh, we find that we find a narrative of the deceased person through the lens of somebody else. So in effect, what we're seeing um, is a memory, or they're saying a bunch of memories of the experiences that that a particular person has had with the person who has passed on. So that is also a form of narrative, a form of second person narrative. So it's again very interesting, and monuments also serve a very similar purpose. So we have many agents of memories. These are just a very few select examples that are relevant in our present culture. There are many more agents of memories that we can explore depending on our interests. Now, finally, coming to the actual point, why did I choose memory studies when I was required to talk about a literature topic? This is because I believe that memory studies is extremely relevant to literature. Um, According to Renat Lackman, who is a memory studies scholar, writing is both an act of memory and an act of interpretation by which every new text is etched into memory space. So, according to Renat Lackman, the very act of writing constitutes memory. And I wholeheartedly agree with her because at the end of the day, what exactly is literature? It is just it is just a collection of the author's memories being presented to us in a very appealing manner, being presented to us in the garb of a narration. We find we find the memories of the author being transferred into the life of another character. We find the experiences of the author being transferred uh, into a different setting. But the basis for literature will always remain memories, and it will always remain experiences of the person who is writing. So, memory studies is very central to literature, and which is why I chose the topic. And in memory, we have the concept of fiction of memory. And fiction of memory is a phrase that refers to two happenings. The first one is it refers to the literary and non referential narratives that depict the workings of memory. And second, it refers to the stories that are told by individuals and cultures about their past to answer the question, who am I? So we find that most novels, essays, poems, or any work of literature, anything at all, uh, they are they have this merit of literature. They have this merit of being literary. But what they're actually doing is they're depicting the workings of memory. And then we have most novels and most works of literature centered around individuals and cultures, and we find that in most of those novels they're trying to answer questions about their past. They are trying to answer a fundamental question that we all ask ourselves, and that question is, who am I? Let me take the example of a few novels to explain this. So let's take the example of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Now we know that Mrs. Dalloway is a stream of consciousness novel uh, that is centered around the life of Clarissa Dalloway, who is the protagonist, and it is told set in London, and it is told during the course of a day. What basically is happening in Mrs. Dalloway is we are getting to know about Mrs. Dalloway's life uh, through her account of her day, through her account of the people in her life, and all those accounts are based on her memories. They are based on Mrs. Dalloway's memories of the present and the past. And we also find the character of Septimus Warren Smith, and we find that his trauma is hugely based on his memories as well. And we find that the lives of Clarissa Dalloway and Septimus Warren Smith intersect because their memories intersect, because their memories enable that intersection. Had it not been for the memories of these characters, we would not have the novel Mrs. Dalloway. So that is one example. Uh, to explain the second point, to explain uh, the second point, we can take so many novels. Uh, we can. There's really no dearth of novels in that category. For instance, let us take the novel. Um, let us take the novel the the Kite Runner, The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. For people who read the novel, they know that the novel is about the tale of friendship between two boys, and it's about at one point it is about how those two boys change over the time and how their relationship changes over the time. Um, Um, it's about this young boy named Amir, and about his friendship with Hassan. Uh, basically, the Kite Runner, uh, the Kite Runner is hinged upon the childhood memories of these two boys, and later when Amir grows up, it is through his memories, his shared memories with Hassan, that he tries to answer the question of who am I. We also have this happening very evidently in the Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison, where Macon Dead Jr. he navigates through a very complex web of memories, through his own memories, through the memories of his father, uh, through the memories of his aunt. Pilot through the memories of his community at Virginia to answer the question of who am I? And we find that this question, who am I, really cannot be answered without stories. And stories are basically at their very fundamental state, they are a collection of memories. So all of literature can be viewed as this vast repository of memories um, that are bequeathed to us in fascinating terms. So it's it's almost like a goodie bag of memories in a very ornate packaging. So uh, that's the way I look at the connection between literature and memory studies. Before I end, I would just like to talk about how I got interested in this field. So from childhood, I've always been interested in literature. It's been my primary interest, but I've also been very fascinated by the workings of the human mind. I've always been fascinated by how the human mind works. So for me, memory studies uh, give a platform to unite my twin passions, and that's how I got interested in the field because it has such a multidisciplinary outlook, makes it very interesting, and obviously it's very relevant to literature. So it's a great opportunity. Um, I've tried my best to give you the very basics of the field. So if you're interested, please do look it up. It's a very rewarding field, very worthwhile field, and it's very exciting. Thank you very much for listening to me.